Welcome to Penthouse or Outhouse, where two product managers dissect startups that either went to the moon or went down in flames. In this episode, I'm telling Will the story of Habbo Hotel, the early 2000s pixelated virtual world, part chat room, part game, and basically proto-Metaverse with NFTs before anyone had the words for it. We'll track how they scaled to tens of millions in revenue with barely any funding, before things in the real world started catching up with them. Turns out, what happens in the Metaverse does not always stay in the Metaverse. As usual, Will is coming in cold, hearing this for the first time, so join us as we see how Habbo handled the pressure and decide on where it lands on that continuum from the outhouse to the penthouse. Will, how's it going? Been a while since our last episode.
It has. I've missed you. You know, we've been going through the washing machine here in Australian Techland, which is fun, but we've come out the other side.
Not just Australian Techland. Over here in the US, there's been no shortage of layoffs as well.
Yeah.
As we were discussing off air previously, yet to be seen how sustainable these layoffs are or whether it's going to be an overshoot, but I guess that'll come out in the wash.
Yeah. I look forward to that wash. It'll be very interesting.
Yeah. Well, today we're changing tack slightly. I feel like a lot of our episodes were very sort of 2010s tech in terms of having huge funding, winner takes all logic, and businesses losing money for years, with the obvious exception of Plenty of Fish. Today's story goes a little bit back further to that sort of more Plenty of Fish era. And actually, it's long before anyone talked about the Metaverse, but there was a small Finnish company that kind of built something pretty close. Do you know where I'm going with this one? Have you heard of it?
You know what? Nothing immediately jumps to mind. I'm very excited to hear what we've got coming up.
Cool. Well, the company was called Sulake. I think I've pronounced that correctly. And the product was called Habbo Hotel. And it was
God, it's a millennial fever dream.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what we're trying to go for here, right? Like,
yeah,
if nothing else, we can go for some nostalgia. But like a lot of early internet ideas, it started pretty scrappily. So I will give you like a brief overview of the founder story, where they came from, and where the product initially started. And then we'll kind of go into its initial early success, which was pretty significant because it was in like the social media boom era of Facebook and things just going on this absolute tear. And then it had a super interesting, I don't want to say demise because it actually still exists today, but it had a bit of a turn of fate.
Okay, here we go. Finnish company, Habbo Hotel, great success, terrible crash, somehow still around. Perfect.
Yeah,
sounds
somehow
like
still around.
I think Penthouse or the Outhouse story.
Well, yeah, I don't know where we'll place it, but let's have a look. I think it had a bit of a resurgence during COVID because people were sitting around and being nostalgic about times when they're allowed to go outside and everything else. But I mean, this company started with, I'm going to butcher their last name, so I'm not even going to bother.
Yeah.
First names, Sampo and Arpo, very Finnish names. But they were experimenting with graphical chat environments. And it was basically like of a piece with MSN Messenger and those sorts of things. And the first version of it was just sort of a chat room and it didn't perform that well. But then they had a very simple idea, which was to make like a small isometric room where people would hang out and little pixel avatars and people walking around and chatting. And what they noticed is once you gave people, at least in the early 2000s, an avatar and a space, the behavior changed quite a lot. And people weren't just having a chat and leaving. They were hanging around and treating it almost like a virtual space, which is something that Mark Zuckerberg was having dreams about in the late 2010s, right? That's what he wanted everyone to be doing.
Yeah, but he wanted them to be like 3D avatars with no legs in a room where you couldn't see the door. Oh, no, wait, actually, it was you could see the door. You needed to be able to see the door. Otherwise, people really freaked out and they thought they were trapped and then wanted to take off the headset. It was such an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the headset's an important part of like that as well, right? I mean, who wants to be walking around in the real world wearing a massive headset? I feel like it's not the most attractive thing.
No, but there was a great Instagram during the week of a tourist with an Apple Vision Pro, but looking at the Sydney Harbour Bridge, like standing in front of the Opera House, looking at the Harbour Bridge through his Vision Pro. Oh, mate, get it together. It's interesting as well. This is like, I guess, the time of like isometric top-down views of things were, I guess, more common if you think of like The Sims or like Railway Tycoon or like all of those kind of like life games had this 2D, 3, 2.5D setup.
I mean, Age of Empires even.
Oh God, bring it back.
Yeah.
Whiling away computer class playing Age of Empires, the best.
We need LAN parties back. Who cares about graphics?
And so yeah, okay, a chat room on top of The Sims where all your friends are. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what it was. On the one hand, it sounds kind of sad, just go hang out in the real world, but I guess it was a way for people to meet, and clearly it worked relatively well. The way it was kind of set out was every user got a cartoon hotel room, which itself was free. But in the event that you wanted to decorate it, which for some reason people did, you could get like sofas and plants and jukeboxes, arcade machines and things, and you could do that with Habbo coins. So they're almost getting into cryptocurrency before that was even cool.
They were early to the loot box.
Yeah, and like, some items cost around 20 cents. So they were individually quite small purchases, but people did actually start decorating their rooms and putting a bit of effort into it. I mean, I guess it makes sense if you look at it from like, you remember MySpace and people would put all of this effort into decorating their profile page there. I guess it's not that much of a stretch that people would be prepared to pay something for it.
No, not at all. I think that's like a pretty consistent trend with these kind of experiences of people buying MySpace themes or spending Habbo coins on their stuff. I guess it's interesting. It's like, I wonder how much of the consumption was people with their own money spending it versus kids jumping in and borrowing their parents' credit cards to buy arcade games and stuff to impress their friends on Habbo Hotel.
100%. A lot of the users were teens, so they were targeting sort of the 13 to 17-year-old market. That was where, I mean, I think I've got a little percentage here if I can find it. Well, I'm not exactly sure. It's somewhere in my notes, but a very high proportion of it. And these items became status symbols, I guess, where people were sort of one-upping their friends.
Cool. So we've got a predominantly teen audience on Habbo Hotel spending their parents' money decorating hotel rooms with status symbols to impress their friends.
I mean, maybe it was their parents' money. Maybe they just really washed their parents' car a lot. And
true. Their newspaper route was very profitable, so they could buy many pinball machines.
Exactly. That lemonade stand was really kicking off.
Yeah, nailed it.
The other thing that was interesting about it was that it wasn't just a case of them purchasing items for their own from the platform, which they could. They also, there was a secondary market where rare items would circulate and sell at a bit more of a premium. So rooms became like little social hubs and things as well. Of course, there was a rake that was being taken there. So on the secondary market, they can get a clip of those transactions as well. So it's quite elegant, really. You've got a platform that in itself was quite lightweight. The users create most of the content, and then the revenue comes from purely digital goods, which have essentially a zero marginal cost.
So it's not just crypto, but it's NFTs.
Yeah, and they did actually pivot to the NFT space when that became all the rage.
Of course.
Which makes total sense, right? And the revenue numbers were actually quite impressive. It started in, I want to say 1999, sometime around then. By 2004, it was making $20 million in revenue. By 2005, we were up to $37 million, and it was like $50 million in 2006. And this was just pretty much entirely through virtual items. And then investors started paying attention, and they started getting backing from groups like Benchmark and investors that were connected to SoftBank. And the staff grew from 45 in that 2004 era to over 300 in 2007. And it was expanding across Europe and North America and Asia. So it was actually a massive success.
So this, I mean, that's a really interesting pivot point. Like $50 million of revenue with 50 staff after a couple of years. Like, that's $1 million, say $1 million a head is pretty good from a revenue perspective. And I can't imagine the costs were enormous to operate, although I guess they wouldn't have had that much cloud. They would have had to build a bunch of their own infrastructure, so maybe a bit more. But I mean, this is going to be a really interesting question of what was the initial funding? Were they all just bootstrapped and self-funded? And then did they take, why did they take that incremental funding? What did they think they were going to get for that?
As far as I could see, it was sort of initial bootstrap from those two co-founders, and then they started to make a bunch of money. And I guess they must have been thinking big in terms of, I guess Facebook, MySpace style, let's turn this into a unicorn type company, not just a wildly profitable business. I wasn't able to find exact numbers that they got in those fundraising rounds, but it does look like they were able to scale pretty aggressively. So by around 2010, and that is when they are still having Facebook, MySpace, less so MySpace by that point, but competing with them, they are having the social network boom, but they had like 172 million registered characters and 15 million monthly visitors, 120 million user created rooms, and it was in 11 different languages at this point. So they obviously did use it to scale it.
Yeah. And I guess it's an interesting difference to some of the other businesses we've covered as well. A lot of those were scaling unprofitable models with a bunch of money. Presumably this was scaling accelerating a very profitable business to further scale.
Yeah. And they did get advertising revenue as well. So while most of the revenue was on microtransactions, they also had some big advertisers, and that actually becomes important. So without wanting to foreshadow too much, I imagine that by around the sort of 2010, 2011 time, advertising became a really significant part of their revenue because they actually had a lot of engagement. They had 40 million hours spent per month on the platform in 2010. The average session length was about 42 minutes. And that doesn't seem like much now, but if you think about it, like reflecting on my own experience back in 2008 or something, and I would say I was a relatively typical user for 17-year-old Facebook user, which was, you thought it was creepily addictive because at the time we weren't all addicted to the internet with attention span of the goldfish, because we would check it maybe 3 or 4 times a day.
How many times a week? Like three or four times maybe. I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
Those are rookie numbers, to paraphrase Matthew McConaughey at that point. But 42 minutes at that time was actually kind of impressive.
42 minutes for something where there was probably still a lot of people on like a dial-up connection that I assume there was some optimization of like the dopamine hits that you would get, but that you also had to have all your friends probably online at the same time to really make it work. Like that's a pretty big, that feels like an intense period of engagement.
Yeah, but I think there was also like a lot of chatting to randoms, which was a bit more of a thing back then.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, if we zoom back, in many ways, it kind of looks like the metaverse of 10, 15 years later,
100%.
Or at least what they wanted it to be, including NFTs. So it's like years before Silicon Valley tried to build the same thing, the Finns were way ahead.
We always knew Scandinavians were far more advanced.
It does lead us to an interesting question, though, is if it had this massive scale, global reach, massive engagement, VC funding without an aggressive burn rate, advertisers who are bringing more money into the platform on top of a platform that's already printing money, why didn't this become just the blueprint for the internet?
Yeah, great question.
The answer to that is there was an investigation that came from Channel 4 in the UK, and it relates back to the fact of the user base being in that 13 to 17-year-old range or younger from time to time. And I think you're probably picking up what I'm putting down, but things became, I guess, a little bit concerning. And now I'm getting to the point in my notes where it was over 50% that were in that 13 to 17-year-old age bracket, with many others that were younger.
Okay. And then some proportion of the other 50% were maybe pretending to be of that age. And
Yes.
To your point of not just meeting your friends, but meeting randoms on the internet.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Real-time
okay.
conversations, open chat rooms that were created by users, millions of participants, and we don't necessarily have the AI moderation that could have been brought to bear in the mid-2020s as we do now.
Yeah. And also, presumably, a bunch of users who were young and new to the internet and didn't understand the risks and didn't have parents or schools that were telling them about the risks. And then, inevitably, some more nefarious actors who are far more attuned to the opportunities that the internet gave them, which is basically for every piece of technology, the nefarious actors are ahead of the good actors in using them.
Yeah, unfortunately so. Now, it's not that there was no moderation. So, to their credit, they did have human moderators, they had user-based reporting systems, and they had some automated chat filters, but they would have been fairly basic.
Not hot dog?
Wait, what the fuck? Eh?
That's it? It only does hot dogs?
No, and a not hot dog.
Give me that. Give it to me.
When I was building an MVP for something, we literally just scraped a really, really long list of words and then just blocked them because we weren't looking to get that advanced content moderation at a very, very early stage. But I imagine it would have looked something like that in the mid-2000s.
Yeah, totally. And I think this goes back to the kind of Plenty of Fish example where things just didn't operate at that scale in the past. And so there was no industry level knowledge of how to do these kinds of things well, to even know what, obviously you can kind of war game out what the problems might be, but to understand what the problems are, how they manifest and how you stop them, it's like a totally new thing to be investigating. It's I imagine every company that tried to scale like this would have run into these problems, so they probably weren't alone.
Yeah, I doubt they would have been alone. And in fact, I do remember we reference it all the time, but a Silicon Valley episode in which this was a significant problem that a gaming company ran into. And I do wonder to what extent it was inspired by the events of Habbo Hotel. But this part of the conversation isn't funny at all. But the 2012 Channel 4 News investigation, basically the reporters posed as children themselves to see what was going on. And I think it might have come from a place of suspecting that there might be some nefarious activity of the sorts that we can probably infer. But in addition to that, they might have been saying, what's this new thing that kids are spending their parents' money on? Anyway, they entered the platform and observed user behavior and encountered sexually explicit conversations, users attempting to contact minors, a lot of discussion of sexual activity, and this relatively innocent seeming thing where people go on and have their little pixel avatars and then have chats with their friends and buy some cool things to trick out their room becomes significantly less innocent seeming. It was picked up by news outlets and spread very, very quickly, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Absolutely.
And the headlines were very much focused upon the platform's moderation problems and risks to younger users. And I would say, stark contrast to how big tech companies and advertisers associated with them behave now. Maybe I can just be an old man shaking my fist at the sky talking about the moral decline of society, but the advertisers actually reacted very, very quickly, and the business impact was immediate. So major brands suspended their advertising on Habbo basically immediately. McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Unilever, they all pulled their advertising campaigns. And while they did still have that microtransaction revenue, all of that bad PR and the pulling of advertising funds, when they've probably got to meet valuation targets and revenue targets now that they've got VC funding, that becomes a pretty serious blow. And also the company reacted very, very quickly. They had a dramatic response and disabled chat across the entire Habbo platform until they could work out what was going on.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, I guess it's pretty damning on the business. Like I guess you like to see that is the response that the company took. Once again, the kind of Scandinavian socialist energy to make what's best for the community come to the top. It's probably also interesting, like, it feels like a lot of this growth happened around the same time that, computers moved from the family room to the bedroom, or to the, people actually, younger people would have started to get their own computers. And so all of a sudden parents had like far less visibility of what their kids were doing on the internet. And so this like mainstream media, sorry, bad expression, this wide media coverage of this risk has like enlightened parents who have gone, oh my God, like, are you on Habbo Hotel? Oh my God, your pedophile is going to abduct you.
For sure. I mean, not just laptops and things. By that point, 2012, smartphones, I didn't check out whether they'd got onto mobile by that point, but being a company that big with that many users, I would imagine that they might have had some sort of mobile offering, and then that would have increased it still.
Isometric games feel a bit hard to play on mobile. You need a little pointer.
Yeah, that's true enough. Well, predictably, the response to the chat being turned off was a significant lack of engagement. Users could log in and they could move around and they could decorate rooms, but they couldn't talk to each other. So then they're just creating the most boring version of The Sims that you've ever seen. So things dropped away quite significant from that. Chat wasn't like a minor feature. It was core to the platform. It's just that all of the other stuff kind of accelerated its interactivity and meant that it did have a differentiator from your MSNs and AOLs and things, so that it was chat and then something, but it didn't mean that they could dispense with chat.
It's also probably an interesting timing because Facebook Messenger was launched in like 2011. And so there would have, you know, I'm sure there are a bunch of other chat things that launched, I don't know, when WhatsApp came around, but it's not like there was not competition in the chat space for people to move into when it wasn't an option in Habbo Hotel. So it's kind of like a combination of like a whole bunch of really bad factors of advertisers deserting, users deserting, feature switching off, heaps of competition, which provides a useful substitute, particularly on a mobile device where it was probably a lot better than having to come back to your computer every day. Feels like a death knell for Habbo Hotel.
Yeah, and like they did then go on to address the underlying technical issues and brought in new safety tools, and reporting systems were strengthened, and chat eventually came back once these new moderation tools were coming in place. But as you say, you've got all of these other things that then became more fashionable and people had already moved on, so they weren't able to get any of the traction that they had before, really. But surprisingly, the platform didn't just implode overnight. It did continue to operate globally, and some users stayed. It's just a couple of big things had changed. Obviously, you've got the reputational damage that's going to stop parents allowing the prime target market who would find this thing appealing to actually get onto it. And then 2012, as you said, was a turning point in social media. Facebook had become dominant. Instagram had just started exploding. Snapchat had started exploding. So people had kind of gotten over it and got on to other things. And yeah, it had been designed for the desktop era. And I mean, likely to your point, it's kind of difficult to play isometric games on a mobile phone interface. So yeah, the financial trajectory then looked relatively grim. Growth slowed, and it downsized operations and shifted strategy. And it was just a much smaller deal by the mid 2010s.
Yeah. And so I guess it goes back to the question of, did they make the right choices at the time? They were growing profitably. They had like a small base of employees. And so that was really good. They took investment to scale, and then they were kind of caught out by this like pretty core part of their underlying business that would have been driving engagement, would have been driving revenue. Like, did they make bad choices?
Well, I think that they had bad oversights. Like, really, if you're operating a platform at that level of scale, I think it's a reasonably foreseeable problem that you don't need to be a genius to figure out that this might be an issue, given the structure of their user base, the number of people involved, and the fact that there's relative anonymity with the people who are signing up. There's both the risk of getting bad publicity with respect to potential exploitation of children at the worst end, but even at the mild end, it's like, at what point are people going to blow back on people racking up credit card bills for their parents on effectively frivolous bullshit? So I think they didn't necessarily make bad decisions actively, but bad omissions. It's hard to escape that conclusion.
Yeah, I think that I would agree with that. I think they took the opportunity they had and they ran with it. I wonder if it would be so interesting to know if they thought it was all going to come to an end at some point. Because they didn't deal with those things.
Well, you wonder, even in like a 500 person business or whatever it was, there must have been people who were flagging this internally, and just the way organizations go, a bit of rug sweeping, being like, shut up, we're making loads of money, let's just kind of push this on. But to their credit, I guess at least they did respond to it when it became global news. I will just round out sort of where it ended up, and it still exists. Like, you can still get a Habbo Hotel account now, I believe. It was acquired by some gaming company called Azerion in 2021. It did have like a little bit of an internet full circle moment when NFTs and blockchain items became used by Habbo Hotel. And as I flagged earlier on, I think during COVID, there was a little bit of nostalgia from it, but effectively that was more or less it for Habbo Hotel. So it's a relic that you can still go and check out to this day. But with that in mind, I think we can potentially go to the Penthouse or Outhouse ratings. I should say, from what I was able to find out without getting to specific numbers, the founders did make bank. So depending on what their motivations were,
it could end up either way. And now, the hottest new KPI in tech.
6 metrics scored -1 to +1.
With 2020 hindsight
and 0 skin in the game.
This
is the Outhouse
to Penthouse ratio.
Well, the first question I think we should go for is, was it scalable? Because that's an interesting one. Both yes and no.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like, clearly it scaled technically. Clearly it was profitable, like, business wise. I guess if you just ignore the pedophiles and the things you would have to do to not have pedophiles, it scales great. And look, maybe if you had like LLM powered moderation and ML and blah, blah, blah to do all of that, maybe you could actually moderate this stuff at scale far more effectively and profitably enough, rather than having teams of human people reviewing chats and like regexes to say, no, don't use this word. I struggle to imagine that at the time they would have been able to scale profitably if they'd had all the right protections in place.
Yeah, let's give it a 0. I think it's both a yes and no. It's like a yes, but with substantial risks attached, and those risks came to fruition. The other one is, did it solve a real problem? I guess for teens, social clout. People were using it.
Also, like eternally there's the, like, what's the teens' place to hang out? And is that like, you know, around the water fountain in the mall, or like at a Starbucks or at a Habbo Hotel, or now in iMessage group chats or WhatsApp group chats or whatever? I think that's like eternally a problem that is ripe for solving. It's just maybe that problem doesn't have a lot of longevity.
Yeah, I think that's right. And they're able to, I mean, maybe that's why they underinvested in moderation so much.
Yeah, well, they're all going to age out anyway. And I would call out that as, apart from some of the social risks, that is like not an unreasonable strategy for a business to say, we're going to do this, like this point to that point, and we don't need to be able to retain our users beyond that. And then we'll just like profit and, you know, the net present value of the cash flows with minimal costs, like great. That's a perfectly valid strategy if you build and set up for that, ignoring the social costs associated with Habbo Hotel's particular instance.
And then they can be like, and then we'll do what's cool for teens in 10 years' time. I don't know if they did do that, but that might have been what the play was. The other thing was, is the business model defying gravity? No. I mean, it was making a bunch of money. It wasn't like Movie Pass where it's like, let's buy these assets and sell them to people for less. Look at all this growth. Terrific. It was making money. It's just to have the significant risks associated with it. I would give that a +1. What do you think?
I think that's reasonable. I think that's reasonable because we've kind of penalized them earlier on for not including it in the scalability that they would need to deal with malicious actors.
Okay, we're on +2, and I want to make a point of this fact because I have miscalculated it in my head both times we have done these metrics, much to my embarrassment. Even when I called it out the first time, I was like, okay, we're not going to do this time. I did it again. So +2, I think 0 +1.
You just presented the score so convincingly. I believed you. I mean, you're clearly a good product manager in the comms department.
Yeah, well, I guess the lawyer in me overtook the economist in me or something like that. I don't know. What were our other metrics? So that's 3 of them. I think we had 5 or 6.
Yeah, reality distortion.
So was there reality distortion from the founders? Nothing that I've seen suggests that there was, unless they were so idealistic that they thought that the business that they created wouldn't have
any
the issue.
pedophiles.
Yeah, wouldn't have any pedophiles, and that parents wouldn't care if people were racking up their credit cards. So
yeah,
maybe a 0. There's nothing to suggest that there was like in the way of WeWork messiah complexes or any of that sort of stuff.
I mean, I would say actually even you could even give them a +1 because there wasn't really any prior art necessarily to like internet, like taking credit cards on the internet was still reasonably new. Like, you know what, Stripe started in 2008 or 2009 or something like that, I think. And maybe there were some platforms with pedophiles, but like it wasn't quite as recognized as widely, maybe, at least in this kind of scale. So I don't know. I actually don't think maybe they weren't.
Okay, I'm happy to give that a +1, giving us
like
+3.
Go Habbo Hotel.
Yeah, go Habbo Hotel. And we do have one more, which is, was it an elephant versus the cockroach? So did it need a huge amount of momentum or cash to work? I think would say... You go ahead.
I think they proved no.
Well, I'm going to go differently. I think that they didn't, and then they did. Because they obviously started to rely on that advertiser revenue.
Yeah.
And to the extent that that was significant in their relative downfall, clearly they needed that revenue with the scale that they had got to. It's difficult to pass out, though, how much the advertiser revenue hurt them versus the reputational damage and people moving away from a platform at a critical time of the internet.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also like they obviously added a bunch of people, probably added a bunch of other cost while they were scaling. Like they did actually demonstrate that they could run the business profitably, leanly, and it to be big enough to like be something that was good and valuable.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't think it, and it's difficult to pass it out. So maybe benefit of the doubt, we give them a +1. And insofar as the founders made bank, if that was their goal, as opposed to, I don't know, bringing humans together, which sounds more like 2017 PR spin, that leaves them with a total score of +4, which is one of our more successful Penthouse to Outhouse ratios, notwithstanding the fact that it was brought down by pedophiles.
And that's my question. Have we penalized them enough for ignoring the pedophiles?
Yeah, well, I guess that's where we get to their goal. I guess from our perspective, we can say that went very poorly. I think we can safely condemn that aspect of the platform. But from the framework that we have set for ourselves, they've done relatively well, even though it was a relatively short-lived business.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably happy to take that away as the conclusion. Like, excluding pedophiles, pretty good.
Let's dock them a point for pedophiles.
I think so. I think that's fair.
Leave them on +3 in the Penthouse to Outhouse ratio. That seems like a just outcome.
Yeah, entirely reasonable. It's good to evolve our scoring mechanism to have a little... you lose a point for pedophiles. That's a rule now, I think.
We're being agile.
Exactly.
Nice one, Will. Good to talk to you, mate.
Thanks, Ben. How good.
Bye.